Give me a four-letter word for control of the political system. If you said anything except vote, you're wildly incorrect. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and I just want to say thank you to the 29 people who subscribe to this podcast on YouTube and the 3 who subscribe to it on Spotify. The number 29th subscriber is, of course, my cousin. I wish to shout out my cousin. Thank you, unnamed cousin, who you know who you are. Now, why am I saying vote? It's not just a slogan that comes out every 4 years when we're talking about who will be the president. Quite honestly, the least important election in all the land should be the presidential election. If you're going to skip an election, the presidential election is a pretty good one to skip. Why? Well, that's a radical take, I'm sure. Many of you are already thinking to yourselves how you have to defeat Trump or get Biden out of office or elect Robert F. Kennedy Jr. if you're a crazy person and you just like chaos. Look, the presidential election gets all the buzz because it is like the largest popularity contest in the country. It focuses on this eclectic group of people and the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's high drama when it gets to it. And the president is not an inconsequential role in the government. But there's a far more important branch of government that you should really pay attention to. Here's a hint, though. It's not the federal legislature. Now, the federal legislature you should also focus on, because in reality, the most powerful branch of government is the legislature, because they are the ones who give any powers that the president has to the president outside of things that are enshrined in the Constitution. And even those can be changed via a constitutional amendment. The legislature can write a law, send it to the president, and if the president says, "No way, Jose," the legislature can say, "You know what? I don't like your attitude. We're going to override your veto." The technical process for that would be passing a bill, a veto by the president, and then the override of the veto. President says no to something, it's just called a veto. It just is. It's in the document that founded the country. Take a look at it. And the president has some, parliamentary tricks he can use to get around vetoes or get around an override of a veto or, essentially move the 8 ball. But those rules can also be overcome by the legislature itself. But the federal legislature can do all that. But guess who has more effect on your day-to-day than the federal legislature? You have, and this is a big hint, you have 50 guesses. That's right. Your state legislature has a huge impact on the quality of life and on the things that can be done within the borders of the state you live in. Not the mental state you live in, the physical state you live in. So if you live in, say, Texas, and you don't like what's going on in Texas, I would recommend you start voting for the state legislature and getting out the vote and educating your friends and family. Why am I harping on voting? Oh, and even more effective than the larger state body is the hundreds of different local bodies that affect everything that happens in your everyday life. Your town board, your school board, your city councils, it goes on and on. In order to effectively be an active citizen, an active member of the republic, you have to be aware of what's going on at all these levels. And more importantly, you really should focus on what's going on at your local level, because that's where you will see the most outsized impact and you'll see the greatest returns on your vote. Now, that's not to say you should ignore the federal level. But if you have a real problem in the city or town that you live in, an appeal to the federal government is generally not going to help you. And we've seen it time and again. These local issues happen, gain national prominence, and then fade away. They fade away from the national eye. But you know who they don't fade away from? The people who still live there. When the federal government steps in and tries to force local action, the second the federal government leaves, the local actors can still do whatever they want. Don't fall for the political theater. Be smarter than that. Why am I harping on this right now? Well, because we're coming into an election cycle, and everything is going to turn towards 2024's new president, whether that's going to be President Biden being reelected to office on the Democrat side. He's the most likely candidate at the moment. Or President Trump, who is, I say President Trump out of respect for the fact that he once held the office, and that's customary before anybody starts saying that I already think Trump won the election. It is customary to call people who have held the office president. For example, you'd say if you saw President Obama, you'd say President Obama, Mr. President, sir. You'd say ma'am if a woman had been president. A woman hasn't been president yet. Sorry to the gender equity enthusiasts out there. Where was I going with that? Vote. Yes, vote. It's important to vote, and it's important to vote in every election. It's also nearly impossible to vote in every election. How would you possibly keep up with all of it? So, if you were to ask for my advice, which you're doing because you're listening to my podcast, here's how I would go about being the most effective member of my republic that I could be. At a minimum, I would vote for my city or town council and my state legislatures. At a minimum. Those are the guys and gals who are going to have the most impact on what you're doing. My next addition to that would be the federal legislature. Everybody complains about all these guys who have been in office for decades and decades and decades. Well, you know what? You can vote the bums out. You can vote the bums out. And you know what? Sometimes it's completely okay just to change things up, Put someone new in office. Because guess what? When it comes to the end of their term, they don't get magically reelected. They don't magically go back to the office. They have to be reelected. And if they didn't do a good job or they didn't do what they say they were going to do, cycle them out. Put someone new in. The only way the chaotic minorities, somebody's going to get mad at me for saying the word minority. The chaotic minorities of people on the very far left and people on the very far right, the only way they maintain control is basically by convincing you that you do not have a say in the government. That way, when they vote, their candidates have an outsized influence in a representative republic. It is exactly what Alexander Hamilton feared, which is control by factions. He wrote a whole thing on it back in 1770 yonder in the Federalist Papers. He talked about how important it was to stay strong and to stay active and to have these representative bodies that protected against a tyranny of the minority. We're seeing tyrannies of the minority grow right now. We're seeing it in the House of Representatives. Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, in trying to pass a continuing funding resolution, I won't even get into the confusion of trying to fund the government, is being held hostage by the far right wing of his party, even though the majority of his own party is saying we need to reach across the aisle and figure this out so that people actually can get paid and the government doesn't shut down on October 1st. He's being held hostage. This is a literal tyranny of the minority. You see it too with the Democrats. They have their own far left wing that occasionally holds hostage progress. Government operations are typically about compromise because you typically don't have a perfect solution one way or the other. What you do is you work together and you get as far as you can get. Now, getting as far as you can get means you've established a new baseline, and the next baseline will be higher. These are good things. Get out there and vote. Seize control of your government in the way that you always have been able to and you always will be able to. And if the guys in office are doing something that you don't like, next time around, vote the bums out. It's my take. I'll always have more takes because I have a microphone and I have stuff to say. This was 10 minutes on voting. And this is 10 minutes with Nick. I'm Nick. Like and subscribe. Or don't. That's up to you. But I'm Nick. This is 10 minutes with Nick. Have a great day.